the regular meeting of the Berkeley Planning Commission. Today is Tuesday, May 28th. Could everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
See?
Mr. McLean, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Buckler.
Present.
Commissioner Kempner.
Here.
Commissioner Murad.
Present.
Commissioner Patterson.
Here.
Commissioner Richardson.
Present.
Commissioner Shadle.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Trotto.
Here.
And Chair Kapelansky.
Here. Thank you. All right, next up we have approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes or motions to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. McLean?
Buckler.
Yes.
Kempner.
Yes.
Murad.
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shadle.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Trotto.
Yes.
Kapelansky.
Yes. All right, the meeting minutes from April 23rd, 2019. Any changes or additions or motions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. McLean?
Kempner.
Yes.
Murad.
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shadle.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Trotto.
Yes.
Buckler.
Yes.
Kapelansky.
Yes. Any communications for this evening?
None at this time.
Okay. Moving along then to citizen comment. Are there any citizens that would like to comment on an item not on the agenda? Okay. All right, we will move on and close citizen comments then. First up then is our first order of business, an ordinance amendment to propose language to permit child care centers as a special use in the local business and office districts. Mr. McLean?
Yes, per our discussions at the last meeting and correspondence that I'd had with a developer, we've developed some draft language that would permit child care centers as a special use in both the local business district and the office district and a local business district. Based on the feedback from the Planning Commission, it was the preference that this would be a special use versus something that's principally permitted in those districts. Additionally, we discussed language that would defer to state regulations, in terms of licensing and facility requirements. The applicant would be required to prove that they are licensed, and they would be required to meet the minimum standards established by the Michigan Child Care Organizations Act of 1973, which was amended in 1998, I believe.
Okay. Who would like to start the discussion on this item? Or is there anyone from the audience who wanted to add to that before we get started? Did you want to add anything?
Mark Ellenberger with 814. Thank you for allowing me to be here this evening. I just started to think about it. I didn't have anything really to add. I think it's a good compromise to give the city the control as a special approval to be able to guide the development and then also require the licensing. The only item that I was thinking of, as Mr. McLean said it kind of clicked in my head that often you'll go through the licensing process through as you're under construction. So I don't know if it would be a consideration for the Planning Commission or not to, grant a special approval conditional upon that standpoint, but generally, as we've developed child care facilities, we'll get their approvals through the municipality, begin construction, and at that point the tenant will begin their licensing because it's generally their operation that will be licensed. So just something to think about as far as whether you would want that conditionally or if there's other ways to look at it. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I have a
Mr. Richardson?
question. This is just more soliciting a comment from you, I think, than anything else. It's about the state regulatory requirements. The version I read requires a fence around a public playground or a school playground that is used for outdoor recreation for childcare center. It does not appear to have that requirement for an adjacent outdoor space for a childcare center. And I was wondering if maybe I'm confused, or if you can comment on that a little bit. I'm not challenging it in any way. I'm just a little puzzled by that.
If I may ask, what would be the adjacent outdoor space? So generally speaking, the playground areas would have to be fenced generally.
Okay.
They're a perimeter fence, and then often fences between the age groups, just to keep people localized within that age range. And
Right.
in our experience, the age groups stay together, so the outdoor playtime is kind of on their own from that standpoint. Speaking more directly, I'm not sure what other outdoor areas there would be.
Well, the regs gave an option for daycare centers to utilize an existing playground that's not immediately adjacent to the property. And then it listed the requirements for that type of playground. And one of them was that it should be fenced. And then there are also other requirements pertaining to outdoor space generally, and they don't include a fence. And I'm just asking if you can explain that really.
Generally, the outdoor players are totally enclosed with fencing. You'll have maybe some lawn areas that are landscaped areas, because generally you don't want the landscaping or site improvements inside the playgrounds.
Yeah.
So maybe it's referencing some of that. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you.
Well, fair enough. Okay.
Questions? Mr. Smith?
Just want to make a comment in lines of what the gentleman said about the licensure. That's very much the same with adult foster care, home for the aged, skilled care, where the license is granted during construction. It's not usually a site plan approval. We have in our ordinance proposed here that it will be a licensed facility, but that's something that's after the fact. It's really not part of the Planning Commission's duty. And I was just curious. I went through all the other ordinances and was just kind of interested that these child care centers, as an umbrella, are allowed as a principal use in the community centerpiece in our Greenfield district. Greenfield says daycare, so I know there's different different types of child care, but is not allowed at all in our downtown, our Gateway, Coolidge, 12 Mile, or Woodward district. So it just seems kind of...
It does seem odd.
Does seem odd that it would be principal use in some. We're proposing a special use, which makes sense, but it's not, it's just not, it's silent regarding those other 5 districts.
Yes.
I think that's largely due to the traffic conditions. I mean, I can't see it on 12 Mile. I mean, you have to have an ingress and an egress and enough room for cars to stack up for drop-off. The one on 11 Mile in Huntington Woods is, like, I've watched that in the morning, and it's a little challenging, even though they have that kind of roundabout driveway, because, parents for children at that age, they don't just drop them off and let them go out the back seat and run in. They stop, they have to park, they have to, get the kid out and the child out and bring them in, and it can take 5-10 minutes for that drop-off to occur. So, and then you probably need a decel lane if traffic's backing up.
That could very well be, but that's more of a licensing. If the specific, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
If the specific facility does not have as far as the state is concerned. That's something they look at.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
but we would,
but-
from a site
We
plan
would also-
perspective, we would want
Right.
it not to back up traffic, and I think off of Woodward, I mean,
I would believe we'd give that certain particular facility a very good
Yeah.
look at.
yeah,
if
I like
someone
it that it's going
proposed
to be a
something.
special use, because
I
there's,
do agree.
I think, a limited number of places in Berkeley off of Main Road or even off of a neighborhood area that would be appropriate for this.
So just to point out, there is a childcare facility on 12 Mile at Cummins, so
Oh, I was unaware of that
That-
one,
Yeah, there is.
which district does that fall in specifically? I'm not exactly positive, but
that far down.
I don't know what district that is.
it's right by the,
Oh, by the doll hospital?
Yep.
Is that little corner
Yeah,
one?
it's right there.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how many kids they must have at that one. It must be pretty small.
I've heard good things about it.
12-mile
Yeah.
district, right?
Hmm?
It would be the 12-mile district.
But that one
That
has,
far down could be the 12-mile district, right?
and then they can pull off on the side street.
Now,
and
although it's
there's
silent
parking
regarding the
there, 'cause there's
12-mile
no parking in front of
Right.
it, at that part of the.
It makes sense for daycares to have a parking lot. I know when I drop my kids off, it is, like you said, you're going all the way in, it's 5 or 10 minutes.
Well, it depends on your parenting.
It's a good point.
My parents might have slowed down.
But the circular drop-offs, I don't serve those
No.
types of use as well.
I mean, circular drop-offs are even difficult, challenging at elementary schools. Like
Absolutely.
lower elementaries can't always get out of their
Yeah.
car
Right.
seats and close the door by
It's a
themselves.
mess at the high school.
They have a parking lot.
see, now, if you look at the one on 12 Mile, they do kind of have a circular drive in front of it. It's kind of it's set back off the
Yeah.
road.
But again, that's a site-specific,
Right.
the item. Like I said, it interested me of how we deal with this, and I don't know why we would include it in some as a allowable use, some as a special, and some were silent. Just something to think about as we get into a rewrite of ordinances.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. If there's a site that can accommodate all the features that it needs, then why not?
Agreed.
I had one comment. I wanted to add something about, well, first of all, regarding the comment about the proof of licensing, if we just maybe change that to before C of O,
Yeah, or as part of the business licensing
Yeah.
process,
something like
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah,
That can
whatever's
be
most
amended.
appropriate there. But I thought we should add something about screening, parking, and play areas, particularly when they're adjacent to residential. And what I wrote down is parking and play areas shall be screened in a manner deemed sufficient by the Planning Commission to achieve the objectives of screening and controlling noise levels.
Do we do that for school playgrounds?
No, but we're not allowed to regulate schools.
I know, but, I
No,
know.
that's a good point,
Yeah.
and we don't do it for municipal playgrounds.
Right.
Those are less dynamic, though. I mean, once you have a school sited or a green space playground sited, it's less likely to change. It might over 20 or 30 years change, but a daycare could pop up for 3, 4, 5 years and then become another business.
It could, yeah.
And it's a private property versus a public property.
Mhm.
And I think people buying next to a school know what they're getting.
You
But they
hope.
could buy next to a business, and one day it's a tire store, and the next day it's a daycare center.
And I was just thinking along the lines, too, those outdoor play areas could be basically next to someone else's yard. And while you could have...
Like any business.
Yep, right. So they might be a little bit closer than the school playgrounds or the municipal playgrounds, might have a greater concentration of kids at one time.
Right. Could it be smaller?
Right, it's just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Yep.
It still is a business, I mean, it still is a commercial
Right.
operation next to residential, so it would require a separation.
Right.
I think the language could just be that could have to meet the screening requirements of
Yeah.
any
Sure.
other business.
That'd be fine.
Well, I almost hate to revisit this, but what about requiring a fence? Yeah.
So it was my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that outdoor play areas for daycare centers were required by the state to be
So,
fenced.
yeah.
Right.
I couldn't find that in the language of the regulations.
And I didn't go through it in that much detail, but maybe that would be part of,
I found it for
that's what you said, yeah.
detached, But unless, I mean, the language is a little unclear.
Yeah.
So maybe they interpret it to cover all players. That would make a lot of sense to me, but it just doesn't quite say that. That's why I asked the question.
So maybe that's something you could look into, is contact Laura and find out if they are required to be fenced, and if not, then yeah, I think it makes complete sense to put that in there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I wish I could pull up the actual language.
I
but-
know, that was a lot of text.
It
I
says
do
fence or
recall.
natural barrier.
Where?
That is 48 inches high.
Yes, but that's
Oh,
under
that's the
this, you
adjacent.
see?
Oh, okay.
Not available adjacent to the center, then you can use a park or outdoor facility. All the following shall
You're right.
apply.
You're right.
Fence. Then when you look at other outdoor requirements
You're
for
right.
adjacent, it's silent on a fence.
It is silent.
And that strikes me as puzzling.
That
that's
is
all.
puzzling.
It's
yeah.
nowhere else in the document, the word fence.
So
But
maybe
it
you
is,
can
but
confirm
it
that.
is under the outdoor play area.
For detached,
Like if they went to a park.
yeah. Now, it could be just poor wording. Maybe they intend for all of these to apply to all kinds of outdoor areas, not just detached. But the way that it's organized suggests that it's just pertains to that one subcategory. I was just looking for clarification on that. If the state interprets this language to mean a fence for everybody, that's fine. I mean, I'm a little concerned about fences, obviously, because of the traffic issues. But if they interpret it that way, that's fine. But on the reading of this, it wasn't obvious to me. So.
Any other comments, questions?
Yes, one more. One thing that is really not our issue, but it's something to be concerned about, especially the building department, Rule 48560 is multiple occupancy. You think about it, and I'm sure you've run into this, where you go into a building that has other occupants. That can get real hairy building code-wise, and that's just something our building department's going to have to deal with. But as you can imagine, is a daycare, childcare, is that under, that would be assembly use, it wouldn't be an educational use, would it? You know, as far as the building, and you may not know, and okay, that may be an unfair question. All I'm saying
Yeah.
is it's really not up to us, but it's something that, should one come to us, it can get real messy code-wise, separating that use from whatever else is in the building.
Yeah, and that would be something, like you said, they'd have to deal with, yeah.
Just so our building department knows, or a consultant knows about that.
Good point. Any other comments? Mr. McLean, do you feel like that gives you a good direction? What do you foresee as the timetable for this?
I can bring it back for the next meeting.
Okay,
Good?
sounds good.
And are we to the point where we're ready to have a public hearing, or did we want to do a second reading first?
I think we can have a public hearing.
Okay, I can get that set for the June meeting then.
Great.
And Mr. McLean, if you could just kind of look into the fence issue, and if the state covers it, it covers it. We're not going to go there, but.
Should.
But I just look for peace of mind, I'd like to know.
Yep, I will make contact with the state on that.
One more
thanks.
question. Reading through our ordinances, we don't bring up childcare or any of those facilities at all in our parking requirements or anywhere in our ordinances in general. I mean, I know this is why we're doing this, but should we like develop certain things, certain standards?
So when
for
you're looking at a
parking
child care use, what standard are you applying? I did not look at the parking ordinance. That's a good point, though.
Well, I guess I kind of missed that one.
Well, maybe you could see what
Yeah,
has
with the
been
parking,
applied
yeah,
in the
can-
past.
Yeah, it'd be-
Absolutely.
Yeah, parking for
Yeah.
parking for employees, and you know, it's not exactly a drive-through, but a drop-off. And there is,
Yeah,
customer parking, stacking, well, it's not exactly stacking.
Yeah,
but
It's like an ATM.
very similar.
Well, and
Okay.
depending on what kind it is, some have a lot of volunteer, like our
Right.
demand volunteer,
Right.
parent volunteers to be coming in and
Right.
doing time in them too, so.
so, yes, maybe see what we've applied in the past. We have a table of parking uses that is like a mile long, so I cannot believe this is
I'm
not
actually
in
going
here.
through it right now. It's not in here.
I don't know if there's a use in there that this would be similar to. I'd hate to add another one to that list, but see what we've done in the past.
Like an elementary school or a middle school where they don't have people that drive. I mean, they don't have,
Right.
the students don't need parking, but staff needs parking, and there's got to be some
Visitors.
drop-off because
I'm
of
just
busing.
racking
so
my brain to see what this would be under in the building code, but I can't.
That's the closest thing is an elementary school, but really drawn down.
Right, and at certain times, and, yeah.
The hint would be what the use group is for a daycare in the building code. That would give you a hint of what.
I believe that would fall under assembly.
You
but I
have
can-
part-time
I'll,
employees too, right, coming in.
So I'd rather,
Elementary
if you can find some information on that and feel like it's warranted to add an additional standard in there, maybe have some examples for us ready. I'd still, I think, would rather hold the public hearing, and if we have to bring it back again to discuss parking further, then we can do that. But hopefully, we can find an easy standard to plug in if we need to.
I will have an answer on that.
Great. Any other comments? No? Okay. Then we'll move on to the public hearing this evening, and potential ordinance repeal of Section 138-132. Mr. McLean?
Yes, our department has worked with our consultants, with McKenna and our consultants at HRC on developing some new standards for residential grading and drainage. And it was felt that this is something that should be moved out of the zoning ordinance and into, the regulatory, I guess you'd call that like a police powers, kind of ordinance. So that's something that has gone through 2 readings with City Council and has been adopted. Part of that process would be to repeal the existing ordinance, which is under Section 138-132. Currently, the grading for a new build has to be such that the new build is not flowing onto adjacent properties, and water is supposed to be directed out to the street. And what we found is that it solves the problem for new builds, but it can create flooding issues for a number of surrounding properties. Case law for residential draining tends to favor language that kind of a maintenance of historical flows. Not grading your property so that it's creating a dam effect. So what we're asking tonight is for a recommendation to repeal Section 138-132.
Okay. So this is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing on this then and open it up to commissioner comments. Any comments?
I do. So I understand that case law follows that there is no change in the flow. But if I have an existing property and my neighbor's water consistently flows onto my property, and I rebuild, and my flow from my property now is channeled to an appropriate storm drain, but it prevents the neighbor's flow from coming onto my property. I think case law, the case law is really old in Michigan. It's very old. It has not been revisited, in my understanding, for a long time. Like, why do I have to deal with my neighbor's flow coming onto my property? I don't think I should have to. I think they should have to improve their property accordingly so that it goes to the appropriate location instead of into my backyard. I mean, I don't have that situation at the moment, but there are people that in the community that do. And I don't think it's fair that if you purchase a new property and you want to improve it, and it somehow stops where the flow should go to a storm sewer or the combined sewer, and instead it's going to your neighbor's backyard. It's a nice benefit you've had for the past, I don't know how many years, but I don't think that they should be prevented from doing that, from improving their property, that now I have to design so my neighbors can all flow onto mine. So any improvement I do has to accommodate the fact that all their groundwater comes to, or, all their surface water comes to mine. I realize what the case law says. Again, it's old and antiquated, and it needs to be rethought for a community like ours. I don't know. That's my opinion.
And there's definitely not a magic bullet to solve the grading and drainage issues. And one of the things we did was we kind of left the language a little bit vague for how a developer would manage any additional flow, from a new build. We want them to be able to use, different options, whether it be, swales or French drains. We didn't want to tell them how to manage their water, just that they would manage any additional water.
I think they should have to manage their water. I don't think they should have to manage the neighbor's water.
So my question, I guess, is it just grading? How are we determining what is the neighbor's water and what is their water?
You can easily tell.
That
it's
goes into the
flowing.
historical flow.
Yeah.
But how,
I don't know how that's established.
but I guess my question to Michelle's point is, if my property is improved and I'm handling my water, but like you said, it's stopping the neighbors from draining into my yard, how do we know that that was the neighbor's water that was draining into my yard versus
All of a sudden
what
it
you've
backs up on-
added?
Yeah, it
Right,
backs up onto theirs.
Or is it that the flow from your property, the new construction, is now running off? Like,
Well,
where do
that's
you draw
an
the
easy survey.
line?
That's easy to survey, but so
the-
I can survey in existing
The new construction could also be
conditions.
pushing more water on.
It could be pushing, or it could just be stopping what,
That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
I think it's mostly, I think it's mostly preventing the water from coming onto their property. So new construction, you can easily do a topographic survey to determine where the water's going on my parcel, but now I'm forced to do a topographic survey on the neighbor's
Right.
parcels, which now adds cost and expense. It's very easy to model. I mean, this is easy stuff for civil engineers. You survey it, you know which way, when the rain falls, you know which way it drains, and when you put a new driveway in Berkeley, you have the little curb that you have to put in, and you have a certain pitch that you have to maintain, and you can't drain it off property. But there are a lot of lots in Berkeley, in particular neighborhoods, that there's a lot of sharing in those backyards as lots were divided, and they were never improved. They're super deep, so like the house and but the garage doesn't go all the way back, and they have this open area, and and as
Lot
the
of
bigger
standing
houses go in, it's very easy to prove with a topographic survey. Like, it is, but I don't know that we should have to burden somebody who is currently taking their neighbor's flow, and there are properties that do that, that they now have to continue to take it if they improve their property. And I'm sorry for the property owner who's getting the benefit of it flowing off, but it's been a nice added benefit, and it will have to stop sometime when the neighbors want to improve their property. That's my personal opinion.
so I think those are really good points. My concern is, what is our purview here based on what we've been given? All we've been asked is to look at repealing this particular section, but we really haven't been given the opportunity, now that this would be moved to the city code, to comment on the standards that would deal with this. Is that correct?
That is correct. The new standards would require a topo. We would also require that as-builts are submitted.
But we're only asked to
Repeal the old ordinance.
Correct.
It's been moved from our ordinance.
change.
And it's already, I mean, it's gone through its 2 readings at council already?
Yes.
So it's a done deal at council.
Okay.
Once you've had your 30 days from,
I do think that those are very valid comments, though.
Yep.
And it may have made sense to bring it
Here
here a little
first.
bit earlier instead of,
That was what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Why weren't we included in this?
Yeah, I
To
don't
talk about it, to
remember
give
seeing
them
this
feedback.
before.
no, we didn't.
Okay.
So it may have made sense to let the planning commission have an opportunity to comment on more than just the repeal. I know it's in the city code, but there is a little bit of overlap there, kind of
Right.
like the sign ordinance or
It's
something
going to
like
get
that.
challenged at some point, and it'll lose.
There's your new case law then.
There you go.
So based on what we are permitted to comment on, the repeal at this point, I guess, does anyone have any concerns with moving this over to the city code?
My one question was going to be, well, is what it's replacing with it already in place? And I guess it is, so.
Yeah.
So I have a question at the risk of being off topic. I think kind of pertains to Michelle's comment, though. In the proposed new ordinance, it says that grading shall be handled so as not to exceed the average grade where feasible, and I'm paraphrasing the language. I'm not quite sure what average grade means in that new language. What are we talking about? An average between the low and the high point, or average between neighboring grades, or what's an average grade?
Well, basically, you can't go up really high.
Beyond your neighbors or beyond?
Relative grading.
Is it the average?
Average relative to what is my question.
Is it the average grade of the property or the average grade of the property and the surrounding properties? Is
Yeah,
that what
I
you're
don't-
kind of getting at?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what it means.
Yeah, I guess I don't know either.
And I suppose that is a little bit vague. You know, the key thing in the ordinance was that if you're going to be having any increased water on the property, you have to manage that water.
This is the new one.
Yep.
Increase property on an adjacent property?
No, just on your property.
You have to maintain your water, and contain your water.
Okay.
Chair?
Yes, I'm
Okay,
sorry, Ms.
That's okay.
Buckley.
So the language says, your memo says, essentially, the proposed new standard would allow for a continuation of existing flows. So again, it goes back to, you have to manage the water from your property, and you have to manage
Can't
the
dam up
water.
the neighbor's
That's
water.
right. You
Yeah,
can't, you
that's
have
what
to
it's
manage
saying.
the water coming from the neighbor's property. As far as vagueness, I'm not picking on you, Mr. McLean, but this is the second time you use the word vague. Vague in ordinance breeds problem, period. It breeds conflict, it breeds lawsuits, it breeds misunderstanding, it breeds inconsistencies from city staff as city staff changes. Ordinances should be clear, direct, and understood. There shouldn't be anything vague in there. There should either be a discussion with some language, whether it's a preamble or something that leads you into it, that leads the use, and then gets codified in the ordinance so people clearly understand what's expected of them. When it's vague and left up to the developer, it's okay to say, like, you can do X, Y, or Z, or, I mean, it's okay to put in there, like, or something that provides equal, blah, 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 as proposed, because technology changes, construction methodologies change, so it doesn't have to, you know, the ordinance keeps up with the times. But to leave it vague is, you're in a back and forth, and it becomes the whim of whoever's approving it, and it is problematic for developers, it's problematic for our residents when they go to do, you know, when they go to make a change in their property. So I don't like vague. That's the idea that we have regulations, is that they're specific, and they're clear, and there's a clear path of what they're trying to accomplish, and a clear path of how they got there. And this should be clear, like what you can and can't do. And I guess we're too late, and I'm not sure, I'm not really sure what we're doing
Can't
here,
do
talking
anything
about
about it.
today. I can't do anything about it, except voice my opinion to city council that there should have been a little bit more forethought into this. Because it's going to have problems, because houses, what did we have last year? 140 new houses in 2018?
Was it that many?
No.
I don't know, or something like that. I don't know, however many it was. 100 and, how many new houses did we have last year? How many new builds, tear downs and rebuilds?
I say it was like 47, I think.
Okay, so maybe I put in one on there, so it's 40-something. Still, it's a lot,
It
sorry.
seemed like 140.
Oh, my numbers mix up. So we had 40-some new builds. Assume in 2019, we're going to have 40-some new builds. So it touches 3 other properties, that's
Right.
3 unhappy property owners times, so it's 120-some odd unhappy property owners on top of. So I think it's going to continue to be a challenge in this community as these little houses go to big houses, and as little houses get an addition onto them, you know, God willing, the market stays good. So it's going to continue to change. People put in new garages, they put new driveways, they put a new patio, whatever it is.
Yeah, short of tens of billions of dollars of new
Right.
infrastructure,
We're
there's
not
not
doing that.
Yeah, there's not a
That's not realistic.
not a magic bullet, which I don't know.
But
if
it should be
anybody
everybody
was-
takes care of their own. That's my,
And the trouble with writing ordinances too is that it's impossible to account for every scenario too, so it's, ordinance
agreed.
writing is a
Agreed.
challenge.
But if something is vague, it either has to be called out and there has to be some manner in which to deal with it in that area where there is opportunity for, a little entrepreneurship or creativity, but it just can't be vague because you don't know what to do with it.
Fair enough.
So, Mr. Liaison, what do we do about it? I'm not putting you on the spot.
I think council's
Oh,
approved
yes,
the
you are.
second reading on this. Is this
Yeah.
correct? So, yeah,
Yeah,
at this
but,
point, we
you know,
can't really do
we've
anything.
obviously, this would be something that maybe you pass along, where obviously there's some things that we feel haven't been addressed or are vague, which is a
Yeah,
good
and
word.
I agree with Ms.
And, yeah,
Buckler's
yeah,
comment.
the bottom line is you can't dam up your neighbor's property, even though it's historically been flowing. And you talked about historical flow of properties. You live on a hill, you can't dam up the water flow of the property above you. So that comes into play. And so I guess we've made our statement that there's some things that are not in this ordinance that probably should be. So do we refuse to rescind ours? Is that? No.
No, maybe we ask the council to give some consideration
To an
to
amendment?
seeing how this works out, and if there are some of these issues that come to light, amending it, if need be.
Or, yeah.
Build uphill.
But as far as the repeal goes,
Yeah, that's-
there's not much to it. Unless we object to them moving that standard to the city code.
No, it really should be part of the
Yeah, that
building
makes sense.
process.
Should
Be part of the building code.
Yep, I agree. Does anyone want to make a motion then?
I can-
Okay.
Unless you want,
No, I don't have the
I can make a motion.
item number in front of me.
I guess I make a motion, to recommend to repeal section 138-132 from the zoning ordinance to the building ordinance, if I said that correctly.
Support.
Any other comments on that motion? Mr. McLean, could you call the roll?
Patterson.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shadle.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Trotto.
Yes.
Buckler.
No.
Kempner.
Yes.
Boy.
Was that a yes? Sorry.
Yes.
Oh. Murad.
Yes.
Kaplansky.
Yes. Okay. Moving on to liaison reports. Does anyone have anything to report on their various boards and commissions? Mr. Murad?
I'll just mention Art Bash is coming up the second weekend of June. That'll be Saturday, the 9th? 8th. Yeah, it's the 8th.
Okay, we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's always a good turnout. Let's hope it's dry this year.
Yeah.
Last year was the first time in 17 years that they had rain.
Really?
Yeah.
That was a bad day for weather, though.
Yeah, but they still, I'm talking to artists as they were tearing down, some of them said they still had a good day.
Good.
So, because it was just like kind of this light,
Yeah.
annoying rain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yes, Mr. Richardson?
from the Environmental Committee, 2 items. We are going to operate a bike corral once again at the Art Bash on the corner of south corner of 12 Mile and Gardner, right next to the Berkeley Common restaurant. So we encourage all of our residents and their friends to consider biking to, walking or bike to the Art Bash, and we'll watch your bike for you while you're walking around. No guarantees about people that want to take 5-foot by 5-foot paintings home on their bike, but so we're doing that. And then the other thing is that we have approved a proposed energy plan for Berkeley municipal buildings. I've been out of town until a couple hours ago, actually, so I have not had a chance to convey that to the council, but we can expect the council to act on that within the next couple of meetings, I would say.
Good. Anyone else? No? Okay, Commissioner and staff comments. Mr. McLean, anything else for the evening?
I just have one other thing. Is there any way we could make a motion to change our meeting times to 7 PM from our standard 7:30, just to kind of fall in line with all the other city meetings?
I think that's a good idea. Does anyone have any objection to that?
Would we have to revote on the entire calendar then?
I don't think it
Meeting
listed,
minutes? Because we do that at the beginning of the year. We vote on the calendar dates.
I don't think it listed the time, did it?
No, it says meetings are at 7:30.
Can we just word it now on our vote that it would also include all future
I'd
meetings?
like it, it'd be nicer if it was earlier and got over earlier. They don't last as long as they used to, which is
Yeah.
kind of nice.
But you never know.
Never know.
And maybe include something that should there be something in the bylaws,
Correct.
those are amended as
So
well.
perhaps
Yeah, I don't
So
think,
I could try to start another,
make a motion with surgically precise language.
make a motion to change our meeting times for the rest of the year, if the bylaws permit,
No, including an amendment to the bylaws.
including an amendment to the bylaws, if needed, from 7:30 to 7 PM,
Starting next month?
I support.
starting next month.
I support.
Lots of support.
Mr. McLean, do you want to call the roll on that?
yes. Where are we at here? Richardson,
Yes.
Shadle,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Trotto,
Yes.
Buckler,
Yes.
Kempner,
Yes.
Murad,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Kaplansky.
Yes. All right, 7 o'clock it is.
Brilliant.
Good idea.
Should have shot for 6:30.
Yeah.
I would have been okay with that.
Any other comments for the evening from anyone else?
I'd like to say something, the Berkeley Fair we had this year, I'm forgetting the name of all the things.
Berkeley Days.
Days.
Berkeley Days, I couldn't just drawing a blank, was absolutely fantastic this year. It seemed like we had a lot more rides, and the turnout was very good with the exception of the day it rained. My kids did a lot of fun, so.
It was great. Good job, Lisa. Anyone else?
One last comment
Oh, go
regarding the bike corral. Put lots of signs out because the Cub Scout signs that were put right in front of the signage thing, or right in front of the corral, did not get the right notice. So people were like parking their bikes down the street, all over the place. Had they had them in the right spot, they could have gotten their bikes parked.
I have known a set of signs for the past 10 years, and I do put them out. They have arrows on them.
Okay.
On one recent occasion, I put one out near Clark's ice cream store. The arrow clearly indicated the bike corral was located down the street. The first bicyclist to go by that sign pulled in and parked his bike at Clark's right behind that sign. So, yeah, I have signs that I position them at either end of the festival and in the center. And I think the trick is to get more publicity over the Facebook page and the city's page as well. But when the weather's good, we usually do pretty well with it. When the weather's bad, that's a different story. But
And where's it located for everybody?
as I mentioned, it's at the corner,
reminder.
the corner of 12 and Gardner, right next to the Berkeley Common restaurant. So not responsible for inebriated bicyclists either, but if you want to go in, yeah, if you want to go in and have lunch at the Common and park your bike, we'll watch it for you.
Great.
All right.
Anyone else? No? Any motions to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Oh, what time? 45 minutes?
No, it isn't.